Hey, what's up, guys? Today we're going to be doing a one-pot chicken spinach gnocchi with a white wine Parmesan cream sauce. Now, like I said, we're doing it as a one pot, but if you have multiple pots, multiple burners, and you can handle the multitasking, definitely be cooking your white wine Parmesan cream sauce at the same time your chicken spinach and gnocchi is doing or being cooked up. At the end, combine them all when they're fresh off the pot, fresh out of the pan. Gonna be a lot better. But if you only have access to the one pot, one burner, no problem. It's still going to look amazing, taste great at the end, and really that's all that matters. So without further ado, let's get started. Scrolling by now is every ingredient you're going to need to follow along with this recipe today if you want to try making this for yourself. Alright, we're going to start off real simple here, something I know everybody can do. Again, boil water. First off, get your heat on high, salt that water. Want to get this up to a nice roiling boil before we add the gnocchi. So while you're waiting for that to boil, now's also a good time to do your dicing. Want to cut up an onion, get that diced up. You're only going to need about half of an onion, as well as 2 cloves of garlic. Want to get that minced. I also chopped up some basil and some parsley here, which we're going to use at the very end. But as soon as that water's boiling, you go ahead and add your gnocchi. Want to do it from frozen. You don't have to thaw this out beforehand. You can just dump it right out of the freezer. In a future video here, I might show you how to make that from scratch, but for the sake of time and convenience, frozen's fine. Now you just let that boil until it actually starts to float on the surface, and once that happens, go ahead and take it out. Obviously, strainer would have been a little bit better here, but I had a spoon handy, so I made do. Now, because this is a one-pot video, after you're done with the gnocchi, set that to the side. Go ahead and wipe out your pan after dumping out the water. You don't want to pour cold water on a hot pan because you'll warp it and it won't heat evenly for you in the future. But afterwards, go ahead and add a little bit of olive oil to cover the bottom. Add your half a diced onion, your minced garlic in there, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. Get that heat back up. We're just going to sweat this diced onion. Now, obviously, you don't have to put your salt and pepper in little containers like this. And when I say little, I mean little. I was struggling to get my hands in there, but got new ones for the future. Freshly ground black pepper, you can just use the grinder straight in the pan. But once you have that salt or seasoned well, want to get a little stirred, want to get your onions all covered in the olive oil. Keep that heat on high for the time being. We're going to bump it down in a second here as soon as it starts to simmer, just to, like I said, sweat these diced onions. So once you got a little bit of color on these onions, you're going to go ahead and bump that heat down to like a medium high and add your chicken thighs. I'm using boneless, skinless chicken thighs. You can have bone in, skin on, doesn't matter. If you are using skin on chicken thighs, I'd recommend putting them skin down first and letting that get a nice sear on it. But we're going to just go ahead and cover this, let these chicken thighs cook. Anytime you're handling raw meat, if you have gloves, use gloves. I'm not here. As you can see, I'm making sure I'm not touching the lid with my raw meat hand, but as soon as I get that out of the way, I'm scrubbing up. You don't want to get salmonella from touching anything after having raw meat covering your hands. That goes for beef, chicken, whatever, any kind of raw protein. Alright, as you saw there, we let these go for a couple minutes before getting them flipped, recovering it. Let go for a couple more minutes. I do have a thermometer here. I always like to test the inside of my meat to make sure it's cooked sufficiently. Anytime you're doing chicken, hard 65 degrees internal temperature. I'm sticking that right into the thickest part of the chicken here. So as soon as the chicken's done, we're going to pull that out, set aside on the cutting board here. Leave the onions and the garlic in there, and we're going to throw the gnocchi back into the pot. We want to get a little bit of a brown to this here, and doing it in the onions and the garlic is great. This is also when you want to add your spinach. All we're doing here is letting the spinach wilt down. So while that's going, I'm also going to be chopping up the chicken thighs into like kind of bite-sized pieces, which I'm going to add straight into the pot. Alright, once we get all the chicken in there, we're just going to keep that stirring until this spinach is nice and wilted. Alright, so after a couple of minutes of stirring with everything in the pot, you see the spinach is wilted down. Gonna go ahead and get a plate set off to the side because we're setting this all off on it. Bringing back the old spoon again, but yeah, it works. Now, as soon as this is all off to the side, we're going to be using the same pot here to make a bechamel sauce. Now, I'm using white wine here. You want to use something dry, like a Pinot Grigio or a Sauvignon Blanc. I'm actually using a Chardonnay here because I specifically want that like oaky flavor that a Chardonnay provides. Now you want to add your dairy. I'm using a heavy whipping cream here. You can use regular milk as well, just won't be quite as thick. If you're lactose intolerant, you can use almond milk. I've done it in the past. However, we're adding Parmesan cheese to this, so obviously not going to be dairy free. Now we're just adding a little bit more salt and pepper to the sauce here, just a little bit of seasoning. And we're going to be adding a starch here in a second. You can use melted butter mixed with flour. I personally prefer to use water mixed with cornstarch. We're going to be adding quite a bit here because I want to get this sauce nice and thick. Super thick. Now you let this simmer on like medium to medium low heat. Get it whisked. You want to keep a nice whisk going on throughout the simmering of this sauce. In a second, we're going to be adding our first bit of Parmesan cheese. So we're going to be adding our Parmesan cheese in parts here. I end up using this whole container. I do it in 3 separate stages just to get the first bit of cheese melted before adding the next bit, just to keep it nice and smooth, making sure that cheese is fully melting and combining with your sauce. Now, as long as you keep it stirring, you can go a little bit slower. As you can see here in a second, I get a little overzealous and end up making a little bit of a mess. But not a problem. I always keep paper towels on standby just in case. Now, as soon as you have your Parmesan cheese melted and fully combined with your bechamel sauce, now's the perfect time to get a little bit of a taste.
Cover all 9,000 taste bud. Aerate it, warm it up.
Now, I didn't think the sauce was quite at a 10 yet, so I do add a little bit more salt and pepper here. As soon as you add that, keep it whisked, keep it stirred, cooking to taste here. I personally like a little bit more in it myself. Obviously, if you like it as is, you like it as is. It's all about your own personal taste. Now it's time to plate. So I set this stuff off to the side with a little bit of aluminum foil covering it to keep it warm. However, for the best experience and the hot and fresh plate that you might want, if you're cooking in multiple pots, you want to be cooking this bechamel sauce while you're cooking your spinach and like chicken and gnocchi. But still turned out awesome. Go ahead and cover all your plates with a big enough portion. You'll have enough for 2 to 3 servings with this. After you get that down on the plate, we're going to be drizzling our white wine Parmesan sauce right over top. Alright, now if you really want to look like you know what you're doing, you gotta pour this over real slow. Obviously it doesn't matter, but you know, nice looking plate. Now to finish it off here, we're going to put a little bit of that fresh basil and parsley. It's right off the vine, chopped up. Put a little bit much here. I would recommend a little bit less. Still tasted great though. We're also just going to put a little bit more of our freshly ground black pepper right on top here. And once that's on there, we're done. 1 pot, gnocchi, chicken thigh, spinach, white wine Parmesan sauce. Delicious. Now, you guys ever spit a plate before? I promise it adds flavor. Try it next time.